Wow. All of you are online now? I didn't even start the live stream yet and all y'all on there. Wow. Okay. That's interesting. I set up my title. What does F mean? Why does everyone keep typing F? What does that mean? What does the F mean? F for respect? RESP. Where's the F in respect? I understand. All right. So anyway, so one of the most influential and instrumental people in comic book and movie entertainment of all time has passed away at 95 years old. His name was Stan the Man Lee. And my first memory of Stan was when I was a kid watching Spider Man and His Amazing Friends and watching The Incredible Hulk. They always came on back to back. And that was in the 80s. And at the time, I still didn't know who he was because I was a kid, just watching Spider Man and His Amazing Friends and the Hulk. But he always had something to say at the beginning of the episode. And that's how I knew who he was until I got a little bit older and started reading the Spider Man comic books. And of course, I knew by then. And the older I got, he was so inspirational and influential to my generation and a couple of generations beforehand. I mean, he's 95, so there's several generations that he has influenced. And I've noticed that the older my generation has gotten, he had made more and more of cameos in the movies. I mean, like I said, we grew up with this man in the cartoons. We heard his voice, and if you were reading the comic books, you knew who he was. And it was just, you know, we got that scare a few months ago when he went to the hospital, and I was concerned about him then. I was just like, I know he's old, he's up there, and I was concerned that, that he might not make it much longer. Um, and it happened, you know. Um, Definitely wish he could have stayed longer with us, but from what I understand, his last cameo was in Avengers Infinity War. I mean, Avengers 4. Yeah, the next thing. So it's almost like a nice, you know, closing of the book for him to have made that cameo. You know what I mean? And it says here on comicbook.com, it says legendary comic book writer and editor Stan Lee has passed away. He was 95. Lee, the most celebrated figure in American comics, began his comics career in the 1940s and is widely credited with revolutionizing superhero storytelling by co-creating largely with the late Jack Kirby the Marvel Comics universe in the 1960s. Lee had a hand in the creation of Spider Man, the Avengers, the X Men, and hundreds of other characters for Marvel and other publishers during the course of his career. As the face of the publisher for decades, Lee cultivated an image as the godfather of comics and became the ambassador between comics and the outside world at a time critic when most critics did not take the art form seriously. Lee was one of the first comics creators to speak at colleges. I didn't know that. As a result of his Marvel pedigree, Lee is also one of the highest grossing film producers of all time, having been kept on as an executive producer of Marvel Studios films as well as those from Fox and Sony, which features characters from Marvel. There is a certain symmetry to that, since in the early days, it was Lee who most aggressively pursued TV and movie deals for Marvel. Over decades of such productions, Lee has also become the king of cameo, appearing in dozens of Marvel related film and TV projects. He can be next seen in Captain Marvel. Lee filmed a number of cameos with Avengers directors Joe and Anthony Russo prior to his death. So it is not clear when his final film appearance for Marvel will be. Now, when I logged on to comicbook.com, the more recent article was that he does appear in Infinity War. So this was written before I saw that. It says it was Lee who famously pulled Marvel back into superhero comics in the early 60s, commissioning the Fantastic Four after his then boss, Martin Goodman, heard DC honcho Jack, I can't say that last name, talk about their success with the Justice League of America. This came at a time when superheroes were a genre that had been on the brink of extinction for nearly a decade. But with the entire industry lagging, Lee and Goodman were determined to find hits where they could. Following the success of the Fantastic Four, Lee would go on to play a role in the creation of dozens of titles and characters that would revolutionize the Silver Age of comics, ushering in a veritable Marvel age. He was inducted into the Will Eisner Award Hall of Fame in 1994 and the Jack Kirby Hall of Fame in 1995. Lee received a National Medal of Arts as the president from President George W. Bush in 2008. Born Stanley Lieber in 1922, Lee was raised on Errol Flynn movies and dreamed of one day writing the great American novel. He joined the newly formed Timely Comics in 1939, a partnership that would shape the pop culture landscape, as Timely ultimately evolved into Marvel Comics. Let's scroll down here. Interestingly, Lee was officially hired into comics by Joe Simon, who collaborated with Jack Kirby to create Captain America, although he was related to the publisher, so he had pretty good odds. Lee would shape the future of Captain America along with Kirby years later. At first, he mostly emptied Simon and Kirby's ashtrays and filled their inkwells. After a couple of years as a menial worker at the publisher, Lee graduated to some writing